Okay. Oof. Right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this evening. I'm sorry about the little technical hiccups we've just had. Everything was running smoothly an hour ago while we were doing the tests. And then, of course, you go live and everything goes wrong. But anyway, I'd like to thank you very much for coming here this evening to help me celebrate the launch of A Stitch in Time Volume 3, the Colourwork Edition. Evening planned, so I'm going to pass you over to Lizzie, our host, who is a member of the SCV team, and she's going to first of all go through a little bit of housekeeping and then tell you the schedule for tonight, and then we'll get going.
Hello everybody and welcome wherever you're coming from in the world. We are here in the Lake District with, of course, Susan Crawford, and we are going to be celebrating her brand new book. So a little bit of housekeeping for you. We will have a question and answer session. We've had some questions coming from our Patreons. And so if you want to add your questions, then there is a box at the bottom along the bar that should say Q&A. So if you type in your questions there, Charlie's on hand and she's going to swing some of those questions across to me. And if we have time at the end, we'll make sure that your questions are answered. But if not, don't worry, we'll answer some of your questions on social media later if we don't have time. We overran, obviously, with our technical duties. So the running order for you tonight. First up, I'm going to be interviewing Susan. So that's your behind the scene look on some of her inspirations and how she goes about writing her book. Then we're going to do a slideshow, different designs from the books, and run through which yarns are used and things like that. We also have details of our knit along, which we're very excited about. Then we'll do those questions, so make sure you get your questions in. And then finally, as long as you stay right until the end, we have a nice little discount code for you, so make sure you do stay with us. So we're going to start first up with our questions and answers. So Susan, what inspired you to write a book of vintage colourwork patterns?
Well, really, I had written the 2 volumes of Stitch in Time already, and I had often been asked when the next volume was going to come. And so for a long time, I had hesitated about starting on such a large project once again. But as time passed, I would look at the patterns in my archive, and basically it got to the point where I would keep looking at them and keep thinking, do you know, I really want to do something with some of these patterns. And just slowly, I began to feel the drive again to get started on something of this scale. And because I'd been working quite a lot with colourwork patterns, I'd completed the Vintage Shetland project. I'd then used that as inspiration for the designs in Evolution, and then also with the designs I've also done with Echoes. Colourwork has been a lot of the focus, and it's really my first love. It's the type of knitting that I enjoy more than anything else, and so I really felt that was the approach that I wanted to take. Also, in the first 2 volumes, because they were first written quite a long time ago now, the technology and the applications I had access to were not as advanced as now, and so we didn't include that many colourwork designs in those original 2 books. But actually, as we all know, colourwork takes up a huge part of the vintage pattern library in actual fact, and so I really wanted to celebrate some of those beautiful designs, and that's really where it all started.
Great. And so perhaps if people are new to colourwork, what is colourwork? What does that involve?
Well, colourwork can mean a lot of things, and within this book it actually encompasses not just stranded colourwork or fair isle as you may think of it, but actually a whole range of colourwork techniques. So wild colourwork, which is holding at least 2 colours in the hand at any one time, and those both going around a row, We've also got intarsia, which is colourwork that uses just one colour at any one time, and then you drop that colour and you pick up the next colour. We have got slip stitches, which is a way of doing colourwork that only involves one colour at any one time. We've got stripes, we've got duplicate stitch, which is where you work over the top of another pre-existing stitch, and we've even got embroidery. So actually the book is trying to show a whole wealth of different types of colourwork, and if you worked your way through the book, you'd basically have covered most of the colourwork techniques that were used in vintage patterns at the time.
Brilliant. So when you sat down to write the book, what approach did you take to the project, and how did you choose which patterns to include?
Well, it really starts quite organically. I sort of have vague ideas of patterns that I've always wanted to include in a book. So, for example, I've always wanted to, at some point, tackle the likes of Jojo, which is behind me on Mitten, and also I think one of the other ones I really wanted to work on at some point was Chevron, which is here, which we'll talk about a bit more in a few minutes. But also there are a lot of patterns that I didn't know I wanted to use until I found them, really. So what I basically did was start thinking about the project as how it would look as a book, and that how many patterns that I could have in the book. And as some of you know, I have an inclination to put rather too many patterns in a book for my own good. So I very strictly limited myself on this occasion to 25 patterns. And I made that decision from the very start. And then what I had to do was think about how I would combine things, how we would have sweaters, cardigans, waistcoats, vests, accessories, the different techniques that I wanted to include. And then I started to look through my vintage library and started to look at the different patterns that I had and how they would fit into those different categories. And gradually, slowly, I whittled it down just to the 25 patterns. That was not easy. There are many, many more that I would have liked to include, but you have to stop yourself. You have to say that that's all you can have.
Great. So your book states that it is very much for the 21st century knitter. So how do you go about breaking down a vintage pattern to update it for the modern knitter? Because often vintage patterns don't have a lot of information, so they don't have like a sizing chart, and they can be quite vague. So how did you update it for the modern knitter?
Well, I suppose it's actually a very complicated process, and I can only review this evening. I would start with the vintage pattern and I would read it thoroughly numerous times to try and get an idea of the construction, whether the construction methods make sense. And what I would specifically look at is also what is missing out the pattern. With a vintage pattern, it's often worth isn't there, and also what isn't written in a way that a modern knitter would understand easily. For example, what's often missing is a row gauge, for example, and yet quite often patterns in that era would also say to you, knit so many rows. And so if you don't know how big that is supposed to be, with the sweater there is much shorter than you're expecting or much longer than you're expecting. So you really have to get a very clear idea of what you're trying to achieve. The only way you establish row gauge is of course by, and so once I have gone through the pattern and really studied the pattern and made sense of what the pattern repeat is like, often a colourwork pattern will be written longhand, as we all know. It will say 3R2B, 3R2B. I will chart that out. I will find out where the pattern repeat begins and N make sense of how many stitches there are in that pattern repeat, whether it's a sensible pattern repeat. There are a number in the book where I really had to figure out how on earth we could grade it, because they'd have very unexpected pattern repeat numbers, for example. But once you've got that, then you can really get started. You can do swatches, you can decide how you want the fabric to feel, what gauge you want, because really, other than in a few circumstances, I often have to modify the gauge to some extent to work with the yarns that we're now using. So I will own gauge that gives me the fabric that I think that we're looking for, and then we get started on the actual pattern writing and the pattern grading.
So some of the patterns in the book are written to only be knit in the round. Was there a reason that you did this, and did you encounter any challenges whilst trying to convert the vintage patterns to be in the round?
Of course, when you decide to work to go with Colourwork, you have to tackle the question about whether Colourwork should be knitted flat, as in the vintage patterns, or whether you convert them into working in the round. And it was something I gave an awful lot of thought to, because I do try to be as authentic and as true to vintage patterns as I possibly can. So changing the construction methods doesn't really follow that plan. But once you stranded Colourwork, I felt it was important to actually make the process intuitive and as pleasurable as possible for the knitter. And so really, particularly for stranded Colourwork, it makes sense if you are knitting a sweater, for example, that it would be in one piece in the round, because you are only dealing with the right side of the fabric at round. You are holding your yarns in the same place on every round to see your knitting, and you are able to follow your knitting. And stranded Colourwork is a very visual medium, so you can really see what you're doing. The sweater you're wearing, for example, because it's so lovely and symmetrical, you can, once you've knitted some of it, as long as you can see it, you can immediately see what you're supposed to do next. So having to turn the work round actually is counterintuitive in a way. It means you're having to work on the back of the work rather than always looking at the front. Obviously, there are things that can cause complications with that, because you get a different gauge if you're working in the round, and also if you're knitting every round rather than if you're knitting and then purl in a row. So it's very, very important that count when you're making the changes. However, I didn't want for this to be a book that was only about working in the round. So a number of the patterns have both instructions to work in the round or to knit flat. But because of that, it is really, really important that you follow the gauge instructions for the pattern in question. For example, we were chevron here, and this was a very, very tricky one, because although this is not actually stranded Colourwork, obviously, but it still had a pattern that varies quite differently in gauge when you knit it round to if you knit it in flat pieces. And because of its propensity to split, it's not got seams to hold it in position, we had to really work with many swatches to establish the gauge that would work to keep it where it needs, rather than it spreading and becoming much more blouson-y than actually you would want it to be. So it's things like that so in this particular one, for example, there is both in the round instructions and knitted flat instructions, but if you look, there are different gauge information for the two. So there's been an awful lot of work done in the patterns to make sure that whether we change it or we keep it the same, you've got the information that you need. There's also a guidance section at the front of the book that actually gives you advice on if you want to knit a cardigan flat rather than in the round. You can still knit it in one piece, but you can work back and forth, putting the steek in the middle and various other hints and tips as well. So I've tried to do as much as I can to make the patterns as accessible to everybody, regardless of their preferred style of knitting.
Brilliant. So once you have your patterns ready, how do you choose which colours to use or which yarns to use? A lot of the vintage patterns are in black and white, so you only see sort of shades of grey, so choose which colours you want to use.
Yeah, sometimes that can be tricky. Spending a lot of time looking at black and white patterns, there is a tendency to see everything in black and white and actually think that everything would look wonderful in grey. I do really love grey yarn because I see the world in black and white sometimes, I think. But at the same time, I absolutely love colour, and I love mixing colours together, and I love choosing colour palettes. So it's really nice to then basically colour in those black and white images and see them come to life. Some of them I have tried to stay quite true to the original colours. I will always read the pattern and see what the original pattern is intended to be. But when you put into a collection together, it's not always possible to always the original vintage pattern is set, because a lot of the time they use quite similar colours. So you use yellow or green, red and yellow. And if you just keep doing that on every design, looking really quite samey. Also, sometimes you choose quite strange colours to combine. So, you know, it's also quite nice to sort of forget that and do your own thing. But some of them, interestingly, Jackdaw, for example, that's behind you, if you look at the original vintage picture, it just looked like a grey background with a black foreground on it. But the colours of Jackdaw are pretty much the colours that were specified in the pattern, or very similar. And actually, it's this wonderful, vivid display rather than this very sort of monochromatic garment. But yeah, there's a lot of them where I've chosen my own colour scheme. We have things like Poppy here, where really there was a number of things that drove the colour scheme that I chose. One of them was that, like many of the vintage patterns that have a stocking stitch body, the background was oatmeal or cream, and we would have ended up with an awful lot of oatmeal or cream garments if one of them I'd done in that original palette. And I wanted this to be very spring-like and cheerful, and to suggest flowers and garden. I picked this sort of green and pinks and yellow palette to sort of really feel very vibrant and bright. And I think one of the tips I would give when you're doing something like this that has a yoke, say just up at the top, and you've got this large expanse of a single colour, that it's always, or I find that it always works really well to pick that background colour up just in small spots on the yoke patterning, and it just brings it all together. But yeah, I think the way to establish, though, if your colour scheme is going to work, is always to swatch. And I know a lot of people, swatching is not something that we prefer to do or we choose to do, but it really does make a difference, because by the time you got to here, if you've decided your colours and then you start knitting your yoke and you think, oh, actually like this, you've gone a long way before you then suddenly find that you're not sure. So I would always work a swatch of my colours to see if I like them. And then you can sometimes it's just a case of swapping them. And I would always say, don't be scared of doing that. Just because a vintage pattern says you should do the colours one way, if you don't think that works, you have the right to change them, or to change the number of colours. Quite often I will add an extra colour because I just feel that the design needs more. So yeah, be brave really with your colours. Don't be scared of changing them.
Great. And you've used all of your own yarns for your sample knits
That's
here.
right.
But do knitters have to use any alternatives?
No, they don't have to use my yarns, although I would obviously, I'd like it if you all do.
And we do have that discount code coming up.
But you don't have to. I've tried very hard to offer designs that can use most, just standard weight yarns. So, for example, Peggy, this one is knitted in Bayer, which is our standard fingering weight, naturally grey heathered yarn. So basically, any fingering weight yarn would pretty much replicate it. You're looking at a standard gauge of about 28 to 32 stitches to every 4 inches or 10 centimetres. Obviously, the amount of yarn you use might change, and you have to do a bit of calculating to figure out how much yarn you need. But with things like this that have like 2 or 3 small areas of contrast colour in, you don't even need a full skein to do a lot of these. A small amount of any one colour will give you enough to do the contrast colours. But yeah, the important thing really, if you're changing the colours, is if you're doing standard colour work, it needs to be a slightly sticky yarn. And what I mean by that is that you want the stitches to want to try and stick together rather than to separate. Some yarns, sort of the stitches tend to open up like that. You want stitches to do that when you work in colour work. You want them to hold together. And particularly when you want them to form this lovely sort of smooth, even fabric, and you will get that with a sticky. It will flatten out, but it will all like hold together really nicely. So yeah, and the vast majority of the patterns are fingering weight. We have one double knit pattern, which is this one, which is conifer, and that again is a standard double knit weight yarn. So you should be able to easily substitute that if you wished. The only one that might be a little bit tricky is our Fenella, which is our 3-ply vintage weight yarn, as I call it. And this was devised and spun originally for the Vintage Shetland project. And this is a yarn that gives me sort of around a 32 to 36 inch gauge. And that you will find regularly, 8 stitches to the inch is what you normally see on a vintage pattern, and that's what Fenella will knit up to if you need it. It will also knit a relaxed gauge as well to give you a much drapier fabric. But this one is knitted in Fenella. You can see it's soft and it's quite light. It's a great weight if you work in an office that's very warm and has the heating on a lot. You can still wear a sweater rather than feeling that you have to only wear a shirt or a t-shirt. But it is it is thicker than 2-ply lace weight, but it's finer than fingering weight, much finer than fingering, sort of in between the two. And it's not, I think there are people doing it now, but it's a slightly harder yarn to replicate. So whilst that is more the weight of pretty much all of the designs, I don't produce them all in that weight because it would be harder for people to substitute. But also it's a longer, more time-consuming knit because obviously you would be knitting on a much finer gauge and everything would have far more stitches. So I just try and ease most of them up to a fingering weight, so that just enables us to use more easy sourceable wools.
Brilliant. So obviously you're very well versed in colour work, but perhaps some of our knitters might not be as sort of advanced in colour work techniques. So is there a design in the book that is a really good beginner's colour work project?
Yeah, actually there's quite a few. Even one might look on the surface that they might look quite complicated. Actually, there are quite a few that would very much give people like a good way into colour work. If a garment too much, something like the scarf here on the Marina accessory set, that is basically just that is knitted as a long rectangle until it's the length that you want. So you have the initial standard colourwork pattern at the beginning, but then once you've got through that, you've just got this very, very easy repetitive what's known as a lice stitch that you can just get into the swing of the sort of the tension that you want in your knitting, the way you're holding your work, the way that it feels comfortable, using circular needles if you've not used them before. So that's a really good one to get started with. If you were to try a garment, there's at least one or two. Again, Peg mentioned just before, this is a perfect starting point. As you can see, there's actually only 3 areas of colour work. And if you didn't want to do 3, you could just do 1 or 2, as much as brave as you wanted to get. Again, you could actually knit it flat if you didn't want to contemplate doing working in the round, but actually it's a really, really good one if you wanted to also, you know, get past the fear of working in the round. Another really good starter one is, and again, this just has bands of stranded colour work across the main body, and actually only has stocking stitch sleeves. This does also have the option to a sleeveless version. So if the idea of knitting 3-ply vintage weight stocking stitch sleeves just too much, you can actually just do a vest version of it. But yeah, those are both really good. Poppy that we looked at before, that's a great one because again, you've only got the colour work at the top. So yeah, there are quite a few. Also Jojo, which we'll look at again later, that only has a limited amount of colour work. So they are great ones to sort of have a go at. If you want to have multicolours in your garment, but you don't want to jump straight into stranded colour work, something like chevron that's actually just stripes with a very simple lace pattern on is a great one. Also, again, our friend Jojo at the back, that is just a stitch pattern. So basically you only ever use one colour at a time in that. So you get an amazingly vibrant coloured garment and you're only using one colour on any one row. So there are many ways to get a multicoloured garment without having to do anything too challenging to start with.
Great. So the book is obviously inspired by vintage patterns and they are quite vintage in look. But is there a way for people who don't perhaps dress vintage all the time to sort of modernise these designs and bring them up to date?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the way, for me, I approach this book, I know longer wear like today, and garment looks and feels, but at the same want to have to do the whole that some people can find it quite off-putting, the idea that they're going to knit a vintage garment, but that really isn't the case at all. And the way I've tried to approach all of these designs is that there are lots of options in the fit, so that you can either go for a very pronounced vintage look, so you can do ones with nipped in waists and shades and very, very fitted to the body, or example like the one you can nip it right in at the waist and have it very, very short and fitted into the waist, but equally you can do it unshaped and have it either short, medium or long length. Any of the garments, that's how I've tried to write the patterns, to give you not just options in terms of sizing, but also in fit and how you might want to wear it. So for example, Clarion here, which is a lovely all over colourwork cardigan. This one is from the 1950s, which you can sort of tell before elaborate garment and uses a lot more yarn than some of the 1940s garments would. But this can be knitted with basically no ease or negative ease, as it would have been in the original vintage version, tightly fitted to the body, and it would be a sort of hourglass shape. Or you can choose to knit it with a little bit of positive ease, or even a lot of positive ease if you wish, and it would be a more relaxed and a bit more modern in its styling. So yeah, I mean, and you can do that pretty much with all the patterns. There are options with every single one of them to change the fit or the shape so that it appeals more to different people. So whilst this is very much celebrating the vintage patterns, I think what you're looking at are beautiful, classic, wearable designs. And that's how I hope people will see them. And people who wear vintage can wear them as vintage pieces, and people who don't wear vintage can also wear them, but still just enjoy them for what they are, which are just, yeah, they're just beautiful, awe-inspiring, gorgeous designs.
Yeah, I think Jojo's is quite different in that it's knitted from the top down, which is quite a modern technique.
Yeah, that's right. This one I actually completely turned on its head. The original pattern looks is the end result is basically the same thing, but it was knitted in flat pieces. You knitted the front, but only up to where the yoke looks like it's about to start. Then you sort of worked shaping on one side and sort of create an arc here, and then another one here, and then you do the same with the back. And then yoke is very, very complicated shape. You then pick up and you cast on extra stitches for the front bit of the yoke that would extend across half the sleeve, and then same there. And then we work in the back, you do it with extended yoke pieces, and then you knit your sleeve and you join them to the yoke pieces and things. It was a very intuitive way of putting together what is actually a very, very simple knit. So I did decide with this one that I was going to show that you can take a vintage pattern and use to get exactly. It's the only one in the book that is knitted from the top. The very, standard top-down construction with increases worked between the pattern, and then you divide, knit the body and knit the sleeves. So this is very customizable in terms of length, because you just keep knitting till you want to stop. Briefly, this is a great one if you want very, very vintage. You would with almost no ease whatsoever, and you would let your body do the creating of the shape. If you want it a bit more modern, you would just make it a tiny bit bigger, or if you wanted it really oversized, you could also knit it much, much bigger. So it's very, the options are pretty much endless, really. Loads and loads of choice.
Yeah, well, talking of sizing, so your patterns are great because they're in a very wide size range. So you go from a 28-inch chest to a 60-inch chest. And was that important to you?
Yes, I mean, I am 4 even, so it's been many, many years since I've been able to fit into a actual vintage size pattern. So I've always tried to add more sizes, and that's always been the goal. But I think we've reached the point now where we really, have to accept that we have people with many different sizes, and we should try and make the patterns as usable as possible. For was quite tricky, but to get not just size them up, but size them in a way that every size gives you the new and the shape of the original pieces. So there's an awful lot into the sizing to make sure that you can get all the different modifications that you need to make it work for you. So for something like Excelsior, for example, that is the 42-inch chest, medium length. So within the pattern, there are, however sizes there are, around 12, 14 chest sizes, but then there are also 3 lower lengths. So you can, for every chest size, you can make a choice of 3 lengths. So that's the medium length. And then this one here, which is in the other colorway option given in the pattern, this is the long length. So it's still the 42-inch chest width-wise, but it's the long length. And this one fits my husband, who is about 6 foot, and I'm at 6. So we both get a finishing point, but with different lengths. So within every pattern, there is a lot of both customizations and sizing options, so that everybody can try and get the fit that works.
Great. So which designs did you find trying to update? Do you have any personal favourite?
Yeah, well, I love them all, obviously. They're all like children to me, basically. But I think from a satisfaction point of view, it's the ones that almost even in a way, because you both satisfaction and also relief, I suppose, that you've managed to turn a very complicated design into a really achievable pattern for people to knit. One of the most satisfying is probably Folklore over here, which
beautiful.
Some of you may know this one. It's a Peyton's pattern, and it's very much basically a masterclass in standard colourwork, really. These wonderful Nordic designs at the bottom, but it's got such a lot going on that to create a pattern that worked from, I think it's 28 to 62, this one possibly, it involved thought, and also these motifs across the bottom. There are a number of for these to make sure that everybody can have not have huge, great big sort of gaps between the motifs and things, so that it looks right for every size. That one was particularly, once we got there and that pattern was done, that was extremely satisfying. I think Karen, my tech editor, might be online tonight, and I think she'll agree with me. This is one of the hardest things we've ever. So yeah, that was one of those ones with. Chevron, surprisingly very, very complicated to get the pattern right for all the sizes. I think many people who've tried to knit chevron, I think yourself, Lizzie, have
tried from the vintage
had
one.
I've had the chevron disasters. This went so many variations before we got it right. And one of the biggest problems with it is that when you start knitting it expands, and particularly expands in comparison to the body, and you end up with shoulders that are sort of much wider than you are expecting them to be. So we've done a lot of work around how you gauge and how you keep it so that it doesn't spread and so on. And then I also adjusted the sleeves to remove some of the huge amount of bulk that a lot happy about when they've commented about the pattern over the years. So yeah, so that was fine too, because that all that we were thinking, can we actually not get this to work? So yeah, it was a tough one. And Jojo, of course, because that I was so determined to be able to replicate the getting the pattern repeat all sorted, and again being able to do it for all the different sizes. But that one we also wanted to be able to offer people different colorways, so there are all sorts of charts in the book to enable you to make your own colors. So yeah, there's quite a lot of very satisfying ones, really. Yes.
And my last question is there another book in you? And if so, can you give us any spoilers?
Well, never say never. I would love to, I think. I would love to, I think, a bit contradictory, but I have got so many patterns in the archive that I would like to work on and bring to life that I think, assuming I've got health and time and energy, I would love to do it again. But I have got other projects that I need to work on first that I can't tell you about at the moment, but yes. So once they are done, I think I will revisit more colour work in different ways over the next few years, definitely.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I think we're going to switch over to a PowerPoint now. Charlie can work her magic for us. And we're just going to run through all the designs from the books and a little bit of info on each design for you. Okie dokie.
Okay, so it's over to me, and I'm just going to run you through these quite quickly. We're conscious we're quite short of time, so I'm just going to give you the basic outline of each of the garments. So this is the first pattern in the book, and this is Rawnsley, and this is a very classic round neck, slightly well, it's set in sleeves, but they're slightly dropped, very iconic standard Fair Isle sweater. We've knitted this in a sport weight yarn, which sits between fingering weight and DK weight. So it just gives it a little bit more body to it and keeps you a bit warmer. So it's great for sort of going out walking and things like that. It's just got a bit more body to it. If you want to upscale this, you can actually just knit this pattern on a double knit way and you'll get a more sort of oversized, relaxed fit sweater. So it's a good one if you just want a really good basic standard colourwork pattern to play with. It's got 14 sizes from I think 28 up to 60 inches. And it starts with a lovely striped corrugated rib before you then go into the repeating colourwork pattern. Again, it's the same, it's the same motifs that run all the way up. So although it looks quite complex, once you get going and you've done the motifs a couple of times, it becomes very instinctive and really nowhere near as complicated as you might think from the pattern that you see in front of you. It was a really nice knit, that one. I enjoyed that one very much. Okay. So our second one is the first accessory in the book, and this is Millie. And Millie, we've used the Fenella vintage 3-ply, and you can see actually it needed to still have the fine gauge because it's got such a lot of beautiful detail in this, particularly the multi-starred sort of crown to it. It's really quite beautiful and elaborate. And this uses 5 colours of Fenella. Some of them only quite small amounts, so it's one of those ones, again, you could use up lots of oddments if you wanted to, and you could make it, you could use more than 5 colours if you wished. There are 3 circumference sizes, so again, you can make sure that you get the hat for the right fit. One of the issues with some of the vintage beret patterns quite often is that they sort of just perch on the head. So I've been really careful to make sure that there are enough variations in the pattern repeats that you can get a hat that sits nicely on the head. Okay. And then this is Peggy. Peggy, as I was saying, is a great introductory pattern. The instructions include both in the round and knitted flat options. There are 12 sizes from, again, I think it starts at 28 up to 64 with this one. If you're knitting it in the round, it does have steeks at the armholes. If you don't want to do that, you could convert at that point to working back and forth. That's always an option. And this one uses a combination of Bayer, which is a worsted spun 2-ply fingering weight, with another yarn, which is also called wold, and that is a 2-ply fingering weight yarn as well, and that gives you the sort of the more primary colours of red and yellow and blue rather than the heathery shades that we get with our buyer. All the yarns that you're seeing are also all hand dyed. Charlie, who is our model here on the pictures, is actually our full-time hand dyer in the studio. The yarns are done by her in-house here at the studio. So we'll move on to the next one. This is Chester. Now, Chester is an adaptation of Peggy, because when we were doing Peggy, it seemed to make no sense whatsoever not to grade it up so that it could also and wider shouldered garment. But because of the sort of the style of Peggy, I needed to create a completely new pattern. I tweaked it a little bit so that the motifs actually finish lower down the body to give it a bit of a different sort of look. But this is again knitted in by a fingering weight, and this one again has sizes from 32 up to 66 inches chest this time. And these two are called Peggy and Chester, after probably one of the most famous vintage knitwear models who everybody will have seen at some point when they've seen a vintage pattern. And this was a lady called Peggy Chester. She actually lived in London through the World War, was always on hand to be photographed, and she also became an actress. And during the war, she actually worked as a volunteer ambulance driver during the Blitz as well, and would be seen driving a little ambulance through all the streets of London. Quite an incredible lady. I do talk a little bit about her in the book, so I won't say any more about her because you'll want to read her story in the book. So on to the next one. Oh, okay. Here we go. Poppy was just a little bit late blooming then. This is Poppy. Poppy, again, is a great introductory pattern. Instructions both, I don't think I mentioned before, but there are instructions both to knit this flat or in, so doubly great as an introductory pattern. Again, there are 12 sizes that run from, I think it's 32 up to 60. It's got short sleeves, and it's got a lovely detail at the left-hand shoulder where it is open with a little button and button loop to make it easy accessible, and that gives you the ability to have this slightly higher neck. I have gone for a twisted rib on the cuffs and the neckline, which isn't in the original pattern, but I decided it would just help hold the shape better and keep it from sort of softening up and going looser. What I really like about it as well is that the patterning of the yoke is on both the front and the back. Quite often they're only on the front, but I really like it when the detail is also repeated on the back. This one is knitted in our lock sock yarn, which again is a fingering weight yarn, but it has some nylon included in this one, and it just makes it a more harder wearing garment that will keep its shape for longer. And this was modelled by our lovely friend Ruth, who is now running an amazing eco-agricultural project in Brazil. So yeah, quite amazing. And our next one is Tift. Now this is, I think, the first one in the book that doesn't use stranded colour work. It actually, again, is a wonderfully simple slip stitch pattern. So you are only ever using one colour at any one time. So you get this great without having to actually knit two colours together. This one again is in the lock sock yarn, and the lock sock yarn gives you a slightly more robust fabric than some of the other sock yarn. So it's a really good hard wearing sock at the end result. I think there are 5 leg circumference widths, so it's very versatile, the pattern, and obviously the foot is completely customizable. Play with the way I've used the background colour for the cuff at the top of the leg, and then the foreground colour for the heel and the toe, but you could mix that up, and the heel and the toe could be different colours again, and all sorts of things. So you can really play with colours with this one. You could stripe it with different colours and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's a great, and it's also a great introduction to working 2-coloured socks. It's sort of that mindset of not only working just a single colour sock. So that is Tift. Okay, so the next one is Harla Quinn, and this one is our first example of intarsia. Now, this is one of the earliest patterns in the book, and it uses squares, basically. So each square is a different small ball of wool, and you do not carry it across to the next colour. So you would knit your green square, leave the yarn, start the lilac, leave the yarn, knit the black, then you would work that. This is worked flat and then seamed together. And it's got a more blouson shape because it's that sort of early 1930s style. 12 sizes from 32 to 62. It's got lovely blouson-y sleeves as well, which I really, really like. And it has a wonderful touchable bow, which you knit separately, and then you can attach that with a brooch pin, either with or without the bow, depending on your mood or your outfit. So Harla Quinn. Don't worry. And the next one is cloud busting, which I'm also wearing today. Cloud busting is, as many of you know, is called cloud busting because it was also worn by Kate Bush in her video of the song Cloud Busting, which Kate Bush is has been a favourite of mine since I was very young. So the chance to actually get the cloud, couldn't resist. This one again has instructions both to knit in the round or flat. And as I say, there is also guidance in the book that if you want to knit it in one piece, but backwards and forwards, so you don't have the side seams and spoil the run of the pattern, you could also do that with this one. Again, the motif repeats. So once you get going, it gets into your head, and actually it's quite a nice rhythmic, pleasing pattern to knit. Sleeves, and it's got just a gentle shaping. This one I have actually put ribbon on the steeks at the front. I really like doing that because I like with a cardigan, you will often have the cardigan open. So it's really nice to have a nice sort of veil on the inside, see the inside of your cardigan. So yeah, that's what I also find about that is with cardigans, you get that horrible thing over time where gradually the front sort of edges of the cardigan where the buttons sit, the weight of the button and the opening of the buttonhole start to pull the front of the cardigan down. It's not just decorative, it also provides a really useful function, and it sort of holds the shape of helps hold the shape of the garment for much longer. This one's knitted in Excelana North Finger. So again, it's a 4-ply on if you're in the UK. And yeah, it's just a beauty, lovely. And again, it has various length options and various fit options. So it's yeah, very, very customizable. And so the next one is going to be Copley, and this is a lovely little hood and mitten accessory set. Hoods in the 1940s were huge, and actually they seem to have over the last few years, they've really had a resurgence in popularity, and they've certainly hit the mainstream. I think people like Alexa Chung and other sort of very well-known influencers have all been seen wearing hoods. This one just uses a really nice two-colour motif that repeats all over the hood and all mittens. The hood you can knit either flat or in the round, depending how you want to approach it. The mittens are in the round only. Both have a multitude of sizes. The hood, it's really useful to have different sizes, because what is a hood that is, you know, big on one person can be tiny on somebody else. And the mittens are a great introduction again to mitten knitting. Well, if you haven't had a go at knitting mittens before, this is a great one to have a go. And of course, you could knit just the hood, or you could knit just the mittens. You don't have to knit both. And these are again knitted in Bayer. And with these, I've used two. It's okay. I've used two of the same shade. And then we're now on to Jojo, one of my favourites. And this again is knitted in Excelana North, and has, I think it's 17 sizes Jojo, from 30 to 62 inches. It's also got 3 lower body lengths for all the sizes, so you can decide whether you want that sort of full 1940s look, or whether you need a bit more length. It's very, very variable. You've also got flat and in the round instructions, and I think it's got more than one sleeve head. I think we've got gathered sleeve head and flat sleeves as well. And again, it's got this lovely button opening on one side. These little button openings are a great thing if you have 2 really lovely buttons that you want to use somewhere, but if you've only got a couple, you obviously can't do a cardigan with it. So it's a great sort of way just to put a real feature button on somewhere where it can really get noticed and it can sing. Okay, so that's Jojo. And then this one is Marble. Marble is quite an unusual piece, really. This is one of those ones that when you look at it, you think, oh, so it breaks out of the rules of one of the main rules of strand. It isn't, the motif is not symmetrical either vertically or horizontally, because it's got this sort of I suppose it's sort of it's supposed to look like marbling. It's a very sort of random design, and so you've got this sort of silver, these bold stripes, and it's a great one for sort of summer as well, rather than always feeling wintry with the Colourwork knits. So this one is done in our Bloom sock yarn. That again, and again, because I saw this one very much as more of a summery garment, the Bloom sock has a lighter weight to it and a more sort of breathable, soft fabric. I can't remember whether this one is knitted in the round. A quick look at knitted in the yeah, knitted in the round, again with various options for fit and shape. Okay, and the next one is Plaid. This one is a real personal favourite, this one. This is a very traditional waistcoat shape. It has a straight, short back and front pointy panels, for want of a better word. You might be able to see this if I hold it up to the on the little camera. It's shaped at the front points. Whilst you've got quite a lot of complex shape going on, you actually only work straight. On the second photo and how you actually sort of start the fabric off, you just knit these striped pieces that are then sewn together. The bands are knitted separately and sewn on top of the right side, tailored finish, and then the vertical stripes to create the plaid are added with embroidery, and we actually have a template on the website that you can download with the embroidery. Or you could leave it without. You don't actually have to do them. And the way I've gone with plaid is I've got the vertical stripes on the front, but I've left the back as just stripes, because I always think with a traditional waistcoat you have a difference between the front and back, how I've approached it. So the next one is Marina, which is also up there on our wonderful head model. This one is a 3-piece accessory set. We have the beret, the tubular scarf, and we also have the gloves. The beret has 3, I think it's 3 circumferences. So you can, again, it's got a very short garter. It's either got short, no, it's reverse stocking stitch brim. So you want to make sure that you get one that fits just nice and holds its position on your head. You can see it has a very nice pattern on the brim, and then a nice simple crown. It's knitted in the round. The scarf is obviously knitted in the round because it's a tube, and you just sew those. You sew the scarf up once it's completed, and the gloves are again knitted in the round. They all have different sizes. The scarf has multiple lengths and have various hand circumferences. Stitch, you can adjust size you need them to be. So that is Marina, and that's knitted in extra weight and 3 colours, so you can be quite different colour options. And then the next one is Jack, amazing, intricate sort of colourwork masterclass pattern, really. This one includes slip stitches for the main black and cream body. Then it has a fair owl panel around the upper, the bit in the middle, the bit above the black and cream and before you get to the picture knit. So you have this fair owl panel, and you have the intarsia pictorial pictures and the flowers. So it's got a lot of different techniques. But then in addition to that, on this upper pictorial bit, what I've actually done is duplicate over the top. So you work sort of the main motifs as intarsia, so the likes of the birds themselves are done as intarsia, but the details such as the bird eyes and the little green crosses and all the extra bits around the flowers, they are all added afterwards. So you don't have to have masses of different balls of different colours on the go at any one time. You just go back to that and deal with that later. So again, there will be tutorials on the website going up over the next week or 2 that will include showing you how to duplicate stitch. It's a lot of fun, actually. So once you can do duplicate stitch, you can do all sorts of things. So yeah, that is in sizes from about 30 to 60 inches. This is Excelsior. Excelsior is classic waistcoat with button opening. Again, we've gone for a lot of fit options. You can have it very cinched in at the waist, or you can have it much straighter, and you can have all different lengths. And it also has to fit from 28 to 6 inches. Really nice, just sort of quite neat V-neck front. It's worked in the round. If you wanted to, you could adopt the technique where you work in one piece but work backwards and forwards if you don't want to put in that front steek. And then yeah, here's some more pictures of me. These were all taken at we've jumped ahead, sorry about sorry, Charlie's in charge of the this has also got a tie I knitted myself, and this will be also available as a pattern very soon. I've just got to write that pattern up. yeah, I loved wearing the tie. It was a great day wearing that outfit. I had great fun. Tell you more about the location on that shortly. But then on to the next one. And then this is, I think, one of the sort of real easy to wear pieces in the collection, modern, without trying very hard, and it can also look really, really vintage. The pattern goes from 28 to 60 inches again, and it's got multiple fit. It's also got a sleeveless option as well, which is also included in the book. And this one is also Ella. So it's if you're working in a warm environment, but you still want to be able to wear a knit. I've also worn it to, no, I shouldn't have worn it yet, but I've also worn it if going to the cinema, things like that, where sometimes it can still get a little cool. It's, yeah, an indoor easy wear sweater, actually. Yeah, and that is Harrop. And then is Bobby, as worn by Lizzie here as well. This is Bobby. This is, I would say, probably the most essential 1940s pattern in the collection. It's everything that a 1940s colourwork pattern is supposed to be. It's got lovely, neat short sleeves with little gathered sleeve heads. It's got a round neck. And again, we've got multiple fit options, so you can do it very nipped in at the waist, or you can do it more relaxed. You can have it different lengths. I think we have got, yeah, it goes from 30 inches, and it has also, this is knitted in the lot on. And again, if we just look at the back of this one, you'll just see the lovely detail on the back neck, which is like many of these 1940s pieces, so that you could have a reasonably high neck. You got a back opening at the centre back, which you can see on the second photograph, and that allows you again to have 3 or 4 lovely decorative buttons just at the back. I feel like this, yeah, this one to me really sings 1940s. Much sort of went for sort of the rosemary sort of style look to that one. And yeah, so that is Bobby. And the next one is Bobby socks, which you'll see in a moment. And these in the original pattern are styled together, and this is why I ended up calling them Bobby and Bobby socks. They actually say that they are a pair of Bobby socks, and it seemed to make sense that that is what we would call them. These are a great introduction to knitting, but also if socks is something that you do, this is a very simple stocking stitch pattern, other than you work the cuff basically inside out, and then you turn the work around and then knit the other way, and that enables you to turn the cuff down, and you'll have the colourwork pattern on the outside. Again, we've got multiple leg width options, and the foot is customizable, and we explain where to stop in relation to the toe is, so that it takes all the guesswork out of sizing the sock to fit you. And these are again done in the lock sock yarn, of course. And then we are on to Clarion, which we looked at. And Clarion is this wonderful all over diamond and pattern, which creates an amazing fabric, both outside and on the inside. Full rounded, and this one does need quite a few buttons. This is one of the designs that I would suggest that before actually knit your buttonhole, you check how many buttons you've actually got that you want to use for the cardigan, and then adjust your buttonholes accordingly. So if you're using, like I always do, you will have fixed numbers that you can't go and buy another one. You've got a set of, say, 7, 8 buttons, thinking this is the place I'm now going to use them. Think about the placement, and you can move the buttonholes if you want to, so that you can use those special buttons. This one again is another one that is knitted in the round, but if you prefer, you can knit backwards and forwards rather than in one piece, rather than putting the steek in them. Again, though, I've put the ribbon on this one to reinforce the inside, and especially because this one is a bit heavier, because it's got that all over pattern. I think it really benefits from having the ribbon at the front to sort of hold it all into shape longer. And again, you've got multiple fits with this one, but also this one actually is up to a 70 inch. A lot of room for which I can't quite remember what it's going to be, so we'll wait until it changes. Marina is again knitted in Excelana fingering weight, and I've gone for just a cream background with a pink foreground, which felt very sort of authentic 50s to me. Oh yeah, and then this next one is Jojo, which we've just talked about. This is the top down knitted in the round sweater. This again, and this is sort of, and introduces you to another technique. If you've not done top down and in the round with a yoke, this is a great one to have a go at. I wanted to try something else a bit different with this one, as this was my experimental piece, if you like. So this entire is knitted with by a fingering weight, held together with a strand of mohair silk in just the undyed. So that's the entire colour palette down. So many of the patterns in the book are quite bold and have quite strong contrasts. So this one, instead, by adding that mohair, it gives it a sort of almost faded and vintagey feel to it, as though it's been left out in the rain for years or hung up in somebody's shed and is just sort of faded away over the years. But yeah, it's a really, really lovely sweater, this one. Absolutely beautiful. For those ones, you need to look at both at the gauge quite carefully, because there's a before blocking gauge and an after blocking gauge, and also you need to think about your gauge when you're knitting the yoke as compared to the body. But these are all things that you can learn from doing this pattern. As I said before, this one's very much customizable in terms of length. As you are knitting downwards, you can just stop when you think it's as long as you want it. That is Jojo. And then the next one is Flora, which is definitely one of my personal favorites, I think. This one is a very form-fitting vest. You don't have to knit it quite so close-fitting, but actually really helps sort of emphasize the patterning back to the body. It has this unusual deep scoop neck, which, though this one is from the 1940s, it has quite a 1970s vibe to it as well, I think, because they very much borrowed that sort of scoop neck from that period into 70s clothes. So like 70s, that's another era you can cover there. This one only needs 4 colours, and again it has this very sort of graphic motif, which has sort of vibes of Orla Keeley, I think. So again, just the pattern looks done. I think it really has a sort of unusual, you could go for a very sort of Orla Keeley colourway. That's very hard to say, an Orla Keeley colourway. But yeah, so that is Flora. I've used Bayer, and I think it's from 30 to 62 again, I think. And then this next one is Chevron, and Chevron is again, the sweater weave, and as a basic, quite simple lace pattern that creates the zigzags or the chevrons. So you're just knitting straight stripes and it's zigzag. So it's also a great you're wanting to try and have been a bit nervous about, because the pattern itself is very straightforward, just the gauge that you need to concentrate on. And it's, again, colour wise, it's very, very variable. We've done 4 stripes, but you could do 6, you could do 8, you could do 2, or you could just do it all in one. Is moss stitch, and this one, along with a couple of others, we've actually, so that you can keep the neck quiet but not have to worry about getting it on and off the head, I've used a stretchy cast off, which I explain in the book, and it sits nice and neat on the body, but it actually has plenty of stretch for getting over the head, and actually doesn't feel like it's clinging round your neck when you're actually wearing it. So it's a really good thing for some of these higher neck sweaters to be able to do the stretchy cast off. So that's also in the book. And then this next one is Majestic, and one of my personal favorites. It's a beautiful, beautiful design. This one is knitted in fenella, so it's one of the finer weight sweaters. The intricacy of the pattern repeat really lends itself to being on the finer gauge. I think it would have lost some of the detail if we'd have gone larger scale on this one. It's got the most beautiful shoulder line and lovely, neat little gathered sort of pert little sleeve heads. It's long sleeved and it's got these lovely deep cuffs as well, and a deep welt. You do the cuff and the neckband in a background shade, and then the other pattern colours, which show up really lovely here. And this one, I stuck to that sort of classic combination of blue, red and yellow, which are very much connected to the original natural dyes that were used. So they used indigo and madder and I think onion skins to create the different colours. So that black, that blue and red and yellow became so popular initially. But Majestic, again, it's very, very customized for nipped in or unshaped. You can wear it closely fitted to the body or make it a bit more roomy, whatever you prefer. But yeah, lovely one, that one. And then this is which, as I say, is the only DK weight pattern in the book. And I really felt that these lovely little sort of fir tree type motifs lent themselves to this one being classed as our Christmas sweater. Because you all know I really like a Colourwork Christmas sweater. So this is where conifer is going to sit. And therefore made the perfect choice to be the DK in the book, because I'm sure many of you, like me, decide to knit themselves a Christmas sweater in November. So it seemed to make far more sense to try and do that in a DK weight than to do it in a fingering weight or a 3-ply vintage weight. So again, it's got some lovely details. It's got this lovely little puffed sleeve. It's got the nice roll neck, which again, we've used the stretchy cast off. So you don't need like it's in tight to the trying to choke you. And it's got all sorts of choices in terms of fit. It's got a very, very vintage nipped in tight fitting option, and then it's got a more roomy option and various lower body lengths, and yeah, all sorts of different things. This one, I think, is one of the one long, possibly with Clarion, that has a little clever little extra that there's also 3 sleeve lengths for each size, but they are done so that will also match all the size as well, so you get your pattern matching at where the sleeve and the body meet on all sizes too. So yeah, I've really tried very hard to give you all those extra little sort of finishes to everything in every size combination, and that is conifer. Oh, and I've used cherry and alabaster, or cherry and limestone on that one. And then this one is Folklore, which we've saved one of the most dramatic till last. So this is a V-neck cardigan. It also has inset pockets. It has hems at the bottom of the body. Has this wonderfully put welt motifs, which may be familiar to some of you from Norwegian designs. And indeed, these are definitely inspired by sort of the Norwegian knits from the 1940s that became very popular in the UK for a beginner. But I think once you've done a couple of the other patterns in the book, or if you're already an experienced colourwork knitter, this is definitely one to have a go at. It's just stunning when it's finished, and it's really well worth having a go. There are different charts for all the different combinations, so that everybody on this. And yeah, and it features just 3 colours. I've used the same as in the original pattern, I think, which are blue, red and white. I just don't think it could be beaten, really. It looks absolutely beautiful. And that is the last pattern in the book. That is Folklore.
Thanks very much, Susan, for talking us through all of those.
My pleasure.
I am going to whiz you through details of the next. So if Charlie could next. We're very excited to be launching the first ever Susan Crawford vintage knit-along, and it's based on the new book. So it is a colourwork project that we want you all to get involved with. So to sign up to the knit-along, all you have to do is go to our website, and there's a link there that will take you to a portal page where you can put in your email address. And so that will mean that whenever we release new content, you'll be the first to know, as it will go straight to your inbox. But what does it involve? So the only criteria that we have at the moment is that you have to knit a Susan Crawford vintage pattern, and it has to be colourwork.
That's right. And it can be from any book or any single pattern, but it just has to be colourwork. That includes stripes, drop stitch, slip stitch, duplicate stitch, intarsia, standard colourwork, or any combination of those.
So we'll have a monthly video that will come out to everybody. So that will be completely free to everybody, and that will be Susan talking through the various stages of knitting. So maybe cast on techniques or finishing techniques at the end, that sort of thing. Then for our Patreon signer-uppers, we have some special content for them. So if you haven't signed up to Patreon already, it's now is a really good time, because paid Patreons are going to get some extra content and extra technique videos as well.
So when does it run from?
So it runs from the middle of October until March of next year. So it's a 6-month project, and you can join in at any time. So you don't have to be right at the beginning. You can join in a couple of months if you're finishing off another knit.
That's right. But you can also have already started knitting a colourwork piece, because I know a lot of you have already begun garments from the book. So if you want to join in with something you're already knitting, that's absolutely fine. And then if you've almost finished and you want to start another one, you can just roll on through the CAL and knit as many as you want, as long as they're colourwork pieces.
Yeah, I think what we really wanted to do was try and sort of form a community and get the community together. So we're also, at the end of the month, we'll have a Zoom meet-up with everybody where we can show and tell all of our knitting and ask any questions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun, and I hope a lot of you will join us.
So make sure you keep checking your emails, as we'll be sending out more details and a more detailed timetable soon.
Hello everybody, this is a re-recording of the Q&A session from Friday's book launch. Unfortunately, as many as you know, we had technical difficulties, and it did mean that the recording of the Q&A session was not as good quality as we would like. So we're going to go through the questions and answers again now, and also include some of the other questions that we didn't have time to ask on Friday night. Okay, so I'm going to pass you over to Lizzie and we will begin.
Okay, so our first questions are from our Patreons, and that was one of the little perks that we give our Patreons, that they can get their questions in first. So the first question we got in was, are you planning any tutorial videos to focus on techniques used in the garments in the book? And I'd love a virtual you to remind me what I'm supposed to be doing.
Lovely. Yes, there are some actually already on the website. The embroidery template for the plaid waistcoat is already there and can be downloaded for anyone who wants to add the embroidery to the front of that. And also the colour your own Jojo charts are also available on the website as well. And there are also some other tutorials already up to help. But yes, over the next few weeks, I will be adding all the tutorials that you'll need to complete the projects in the book. Amongst those, there will be technique guides on duplicate stitching, on intarsia, on working in the round, how I hold my yarns for stranded colour work, and lots of other things as well. So yeah, hopefully everything that you'll need.
Right, so question number 2 we had sent in was, I'd love to know how long this book has taken you to compile, with finding the patterns, researching and visiting places, and did you work with any museums or collections?
Okay, right, so there's quite a lot to answer in that question. So the book started around the summer of 2021 and it began with the Rawnsley pattern, which was written and photographed while we were still living at our small farm on the outskirts of Lancaster. So the whole process has taken almost 3 years, which is obviously, there's been gaps between those periods, which sadly has been the result of quite a lot of upheaval and turmoil in our lives. We've had to move unexpectedly from the farm. We had to relocate our business premises, and then sadly my mum also passed away. So the book has been ongoing during quite a traumatic few years. However, I have to say that the book really is what has kept me sane. Working on this project has given me something to focus on when things were really bad.
Yes, I know I can relate to that, and I think a lot of the viewers will too, that knitting is a form of therapy for people, and it's quite meditative. Definitely,
yes. It was definitely the case for me. Not just the knitting, but I also find the pattern writing incredibly absorbing. It has, you sort of have to be absorbed in it. If you're not, you can't really do it. You have to be completely focused on what you're doing, and that basically means that you can switch off your brain from the voices that are going on in your head 20 to the dozen and stressing you out and getting you tense and worried. So yeah, I find it an incredibly very, very therapeutic thing to be doing. I actually use a quote in the book from Virginia Woolf, who said that knitting is the saving of life, and I think for me that's definitely been the case. I don't know what I'd have done without knitting.
So the third question we had in was, can you tell us something about the locations where the photographs for the book were taken? All the photos were stunning. I think I recognise one or two, but I am particularly intrigued by the photo from Majestic, which has life belts in it.
Ah, yes. Well, Majestic was the very last sample that we had to photograph. And in the run-up to actually taking the photographs, we had a relentless period of bad weather, which was making it really difficult to get out and get the sort of photographs that I wanted for it. Such a bright, vibrant sweater. It needed the right location to make it sing and to tell its story. And then, fortunately, one day the weather broke and we had lovely weather. And I just decided that I thought it would be a good idea for us to get in the car and drive out to a nearby seaside town called Ambleside, which is on the banks of Lake Windermere. And from here they do lots of boat trips, and they have a vintage gondola, and they have lots of lovely vintage rowing boats and things. And I thought we surely must find somewhere there that we can get nice photographs. So when we arrived, we started walking down the lake bank, and as we were walking along, Charlie was already dressed all in the outfit she was going to wear. And we suddenly walked past this quite sort of derelict and certainly closed old building that had previously been the ticket office for the boat rides. And it had all been dressed, and it had this amazing blue and white striped picket fence. And on the front of those were tied red and white life belts, life rings. So yeah, it was absolutely perfect. I couldn't believe our luck. It was like somebody had created a set for us to take the photographs on. So yeah, we had a great day. We had lots of passers-by stopping and watching what we were doing and asking us all about it. And the staff from the boat rides came over. The captain from the gondola came and got involved and gave Charlie his captain's cap. And yeah, it was a really, really lovely day. And yet most of the photographs, well, in fact, I think all of the photographs in this book have just been taken at locations local to wherever we've been at the time. So the first few patterns were all taken in Lancaster or in and around Lancaster. The very first ones, Rawnsley, were of course photographed on the farm itself before we left. And then the more recent ones have all been taken further north here in the Lake District. And we're very, very fortunate to live in such a beautiful part of the country that it doesn't make sense to not make use of the environment around us. And some of them have even been taken literally just outside the door of the studio. It's such a lovely spot that we're in.
Okay, and the last question from our Patreons are, in the publicity for the book, you mention your archive of patterns. Did you acquire a collection, or have you built them up over a period of time? And are you still collecting and finding patterns?
Right, okay. Well, the archive began with my own collection. I've been purchasing or acquiring vintage patterns since I was about 16 years of age, and it's just built up as the years have gone by. And then I've also been very fortunate that several people have also gifted me their own family's collections, sometimes when a relative has passed away and they haven't quite known what to do with the patterns. They've entrusted them to me to have, to care for and to use, so that they don't just sit in a loft rotting away or get thrown away in a bin or something of that nature. They're all cared for and loved. So it's amounted to now a very large collection. I've got several thousand single patterns, pamphlets, periodicals, magazines, and lots of books as well. I've got things going back to sort of the mid-1800s and collect all the way through really till, well, I was going to say to sort of the late 60s, but actually in recent years I've also started collecting quite a few 1970s patterns, and Charlie is a big fan of 1980s knits, so we've also added 80s things to the collection as well. But yeah, everything is kept in archive boxes and locked in metal cabinets, so it's very, very well cared for. And yeah, there is an awful lot of it, but there are many more patterns that I would like to get my hands on. There are so many out there, and there are sort of quite a few that are on my must-have list that I still haven't managed to get. But yeah, the one thing that I'm not very good at is organising it. So it's quite eclectically put together as a collection. So if there are any archivists out there who fancy a free holiday in the Lake District to spend a bit of time cataloguing, just let me know.
Okay, so we're going to go over to our viewer questions from the night, and we've got that extended list. So the first question was, I'm allergic to mohair, can you suggest an alternative?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We did try to have a think after we got asked that question on Friday night, and what we thought was probably a good alternative is a synthetic mohair option. And we have had a look, and there are quite a few of them about, so I would just look for probably what you need is a lace weight version of the synthetic mohairs, and I think that would do the trick.
And that was for Jojo, wasn't it?
That's right, yes. Jojo is fingering weight yarn held together with a lace weight mohair yarn. Yeah.
Okay, and the next question was, I love that you model your own designs, but do friends and family model the rest, or how do you find your models?
Well, every single pattern in the book is modelled either by myself, by family, by friends, or work colleague. Normally anyone who works for us finds themselves roped into posing for us at some point, and probably the same will happen to your good self at some point. And yeah, Gavin does a lot of the modelling, Charlie does a lot of the modelling. Laura, who works with us, very kindly modelled 3 of the patterns. Ruth, who used to work for us and is now on Excited Adventures in Brazil, she also modelled, I think, 2 of the patterns. So yeah, it's very much a family affair, really, if you consider sort of our business as an extension of our family, which we do. We keep it very close to home. Both Charlie and I do all the photography. It's predominantly Charlie, but if she's in the photographs, it's me behind the camera. So yeah, but I'm always on the lookout for somebody.
That's what our viewers like about your brand, is that you are very size inclusive, and it's good to see that range of body shapes with your clothes on. Yeah,
I agree entirely. Yeah, and I think it's taken a long time for me to build up the confidence myself to be the model and to be the face of the brand in a way. But I think it's really, really important that somebody of my age, my size, my shape, it is shown in the pieces, that it's not, that, and people can see that actually, yeah, you can wear these things no matter what, because the original vintage patterns only ever really show them on very, very, incredibly slim, and, stature is usually small as well. And if you're anything above a 34-inch chest, you were normally classed as a matron and dressed in a very, very matronly way, weren't you? In fact, I've got many patterns that are actually described as for the matronly figure. So yeah, we don't want to be, we certainly don't want to be using those sort of phrases, do we, anymore?
No. Okay, next question is, when will the knit-along meets be?
Right, okay, well, we were actually looking at the schedule for that at the moment. So if you look out for our newsletters and our announcements on the various platforms, you'll be able to see when they are. They're definitely going to be of a weekend every time, so hopefully a lot of you should be able to make it. But yeah, just look out for the details very soon.
Okay, and the next one is, do you have any Canadian stockists?
Yes, we certainly do. Our books are all stocked by Julie Asselin, and also Sassy Yarns, and I think there are also some other retailers in various Canadian provinces who also stock the book. Julie Asselin is our distributor, so if you happen to be a Canadian wool shop, or you have one in your area that don't stock the books, they can easily get hold of them from Julie Asselin.
Brilliant. Will there be a chance to see the garments in real life?
Yes, I certainly hope so. I hope to organise some trunk shows at yarn stores. Again, if around the country you think your yarn store might be interested in stocking the books and having a trunk show, do have a word with them. And also we hope to have some open days here at the studio, hoping to go to some shows probably next year. And yeah, if you are booked onto any of our retreats, you will of course get to see the garments up close and personal. You'll be able to try them on, as you know yourself. Yep. You get to have a great time.
Get to play dress up.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, hopefully yes, there is a good chance you might get to see them in real life.
Is the discount code retrospective?
No, I'm afraid that's not possible. The way it works is it can only be used after it's released. However, it is valid for the next 6 months, so it can be used for any future purchase. But do bear in mind it can only be used once. So if you use it at the beginning, you can't use it again later on anyway. So yeah, only once, and it's valid now.
Okay, well, this is a good one. So how do you go about pattern matching sleeve heads to the body?
Oof, right, okay, well it's all in the maths basically, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and also a lot of, when I say it's all in the maths, it's also in our software that we use to physically visualise the patterns. My husband Gavin has written a charting software that we use for all our own pattern writing, and that enables me to double check all my maths and make sure that we can actually align everything for all sizes. So yeah, if it's all included in the very comprehensive instructions we give you, so yeah, you shouldn't have any problem when you come to do the pattern. They should align.
Brilliant. And then to end up, we have, when did you start knitting and who taught you?
Right, well, I first started knitting when I was about 4. I didn't sort of persevere. It was very much a sort of like little squares and cutting holes in the middle and sticking my dolls' heads through them at the very beginning. But my grandmother Ruby was a dressmaker. She also knitted, she crocheted, she embroidered, she was a person who just made everything. She made little jewellery pieces, all sorts of things. So she taught me how to knit. My other grandmother Betty, she was also a knitter. And once I hit about 11 or 12 and really started knitting in earnest again, it was her who I used to sit with. We'd often sit of an afternoon watching old black and white films, and we would knit together and we would share advice. And sort of as a child, she would be telling me how to do all the different stitches and things, which was great to have her sat right there as my YouTube guide. Basically, so yeah, it was my grandmother's basically who got me knitting. And yeah, so properly since about the age of 11, and I don't really think I've had a period of time where I've stopped. I've sort of always knitted at some point, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us for the question and answer section.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So you can buy the book on the website if you haven't got the book already. So that is on www.susancrawfordvintage.com. And there's a little code there. If you want to join us with the knit along, we have given you 10% off all Colourwork kits. So that's in the yarn section of the website. So yeah, that is our evening done. Thanks for sticking with us, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you, and I hope you've all enjoyed the presentation, and I'll see you all soon, I'm sure.